Hello, Charlie TCG here, and welcome back to my channel. With Worlds being a couple of weeks away, I thought I would cover a few videos on the decks which I think are performing well and a really good shot in the meta. And I really think we should start off with Gardevior EX, the current BDIF, the deck everyone was super excited to go into the format, and exactly why is this going to be a really good pick and what's it going to look like for Worlds. So if we look at how it's been performing in these big sort of tournaments here, NAIC, it was the most played deck in day 1 and day 2, being 25 and 23% of the meta share respectively. We haven't seen the likes of it since Lugia was its heyday. It's still a Tempest sort of era, although back then it was 50%. But Gardevoir was super powerful because of Psychic Embrace ability. Flooding a board with as many Psychic energies as you like from your discard pile to your Psychic Pokemon is super powerful. And we have seen this huge success over in Japan. Pretty much since day 1 of the Scarlet and Violet, Gardevoir has been up there as a tier 1 archetype, pretty much being in the finals of nearly every single version of their sort of huge tournaments, and it has kind of stayed in that tier 1 bracket, but being one of the most sort of played archetype, but being ranging between the 10 to 25% of the meta share. And online, it is the most played deck, but being 50% of the online meta with a 47% win rate. Now, this isn't meant to say like, oh, it's bad, it's under 50%, but it's that sort of low because it's the most played archetype. We've got people just picking up the list. We've got people who are dominating and haven't stopped playing with it since it got released in legal for us in April time. And over the past couple of weeks, it has gained 11 wins, though most of those wins were before NAIC and some of these big sort of changes. So right now, I thought I would just cover some of the top decks which have been performing over in NAIC, where I think sort of how they are performing and what you could really kind of like see in the sort of preparation for your testing for Worlds. So let's look at the top 4 lists here. Let's look at Calvin Connor's list first of all. And we can see here, they play not 1, not 2, but 3 copies of Ralts. Very different, and each one of them have their sort of specific value. The teleportation one, it's the most common one, kind of getting that extra sort of switching out as well. But Memory Skip has been seeing quite a lot of play, doing 10 damage and then guaranteeing the opponent can't use any of their attacks from one of their Pokemon in the active spot. It's really powerful as well. Pretty much forcing them to have a switching out or retreat into another Pokemon is really strong. Rocks as well is this from the Scarlet and Violet set is very powerful, having 30 damage for 2 psychic energies. Now, why is this relevant? Well, it's relevant because it does 1, 70 HP, and 2, you can easily get a return KO on the likes of these Shining Arcana Gardevoirs and Zacian Vs. That's why I think this card has been absolutely really invaluable to loads of people's testing, and not for sacrificing some of your really powerful cards like Gardevoir or Zacian V, but having the likes of Rocks as well to kind of clean up the KO is really strong. This list does play the copy of Worker and Penny as your real tech supporters of choice. Penny can really help, especially in the likes of Marvel or any of these Stool archetypes. As you saw I covered in a couple of days ago and looking ahead, you can see Stool was kind of seeing a bit of return, more of the Snorlax build where the block ability where they can't retreat. So Penny really helps in that, especially teaming up with Palpad. Worker as well with a Temple of Sinnoh and Collapse Stadium are really good as well to kind of be your Lost Box, the Lost City and the Path to the Peak sort of counters. Now, we are seeing those as the most sort of played options because they don't want to, your opponent doesn't want you to reuse them with Super Rod. That's why you play 2 copies of Super Rod. That's why you play basically 4 outs, 2 of these Stadium Votes, because that is exactly why this deck is kind of just as powerful. By constantly reusing your attackers, that's where this kind of like gains that sort of strength. And Luminion V can really help kind of get those supporters which you desperately need. I do like having the reversal energy and 10 psychic energies. I've been doing that a lot of testing, playing these style of lists here, and I haven't found I've needed any more sort of cards. So I really like that sort of split as well. And I think this is a really good sort of version of a Gardevoir archetype, which is definitely something which you should be pretty really confident with that testing archetype for it. But the one I've been testing a lot about is Rowan's list here. It does play the 3-1 split of the Ralts, but it plays a very interesting tech, Spiritomb. Now, it does shut off your own Zacian V, but really helping slow down the opponent by stopping down their Genesects as well as their Luminions is really strong. And we've seen that people were really scared about Spiritomb, so much that even the Mew deck turned to the Fusion build. They turned so they can kind of constantly keep their drawing aspect going with it. This list does play the 4 copies of Iona and 3 Boss's Orders. I love the most disruptive list as well, and this is exactly why I think this deck is super strong. You really rely on that disruptive capability, constantly making sure the opponent is behind in price, like you're like behind the sort of the cards you want. It's kind of where you want to kind of sit here. Cresselia is really good at the early games for attacking as well, and Boss's Orders kind of switch out any of your opponent's sort of option as well. I haven't mentioned too much about why you play these copies of Stadium. Temple of Sinnoh slows down the Lugias, slows down the Archeops. Lugias, shows down the likes of Mew as well as Arceus style decks. It's really powerful for that option. Collapse Stadium, because you have some damaged Pokemon as well, you kind of want to remove a big damage and liability like the Gardevoir EX or Zacian V, because Lost Box can easily just sprinkle some damage over Sableye. That's why I play Collapse Stadium. It's like a healing sort of factor by kind of removing those big damaged Pokemon. And its Zero Town is really powerful. Pretty much getting any of your basic Pokemon except Greninja and Zacian V is really, really powerful. Again, they 10-1 split of energies, because I think that is exactly the best way to play it. Just play the one copy of Switch. Rowan did say that they did add it at 4 AM and it was really, really invaluable to it. I think it's good as well. It kind of makes it easy to search out through Mew, but it does kind of struggle with the Penny sort of loop, which potentially some of the Stall deck and Marward can really kind of threaten. And the last Gardevoir list I want to talk to you is the top 16 to top 32 list. This is the more common build, which you've kind of seen like going into the testing. We play the 11-1 split of the energy cards. 1 extra second is pretty good, kind of making sure you can kind of easily draw into it. Just play the Worker, Penny, 3 stadiums, and a Power Pad, so multiple ways to go around the Stall Lock as well as the Stadium Bump. And just play the 4 copies of Iona, which is really good. But because of that, they are sacrificing their research by going only to 1 copy of it. And also, more importantly, it plays the 3-1 of the Memory Skip Rolts, doesn't play the Scarlet and Violet build of the Rolts archetype, which we have seen to kind of see that huge success, especially in that mirror match. So looking at these sort of archetypes here, I hope it's kind of given a little bit of an insight into see exactly which builds are the strongest. I would potentially focus more on the top 4 sort of archetypes, but the top 16, top 32 lists is still very, very good. That's good, that consistency to kind of like learn and test about. Any of these sort of archetypes, I would 100% recommend net deck it, play it online on live, or go to your local, kind of get the feel of Gardevoir, test against a few friends of yours, or just understand exactly where the deck sort of works and how it sort of like alters with your playstyle, and to kind of evolve it from there. So if we look on Trainer Hill, it's matchups as well. Gardevoir only has a couple of really, really positive ones. Xianpao and Miraidon and Lugia Archeops are its most powerful win sort of rates with it. And this is really powerful, especially with Trainer Hill, because it kind of goes through all of the sort of data as well. And as Gardevoir is the most sort of played archetype, there is the most more results to kind of go to kind of give it more of a good sort of understanding about the matchup. Lost Box is definitely the worst sort of matchup as well, because having Sableye and Greninja is really kind of like scary, especially because you constantly have to be using your Super Rod to reuse your Mana Feed, because that's exactly going to be always their target. And that's something you should always be kind of like careful about here. But Giratina, as well as the Gudra sort of builds, you kind of can get those big one-hit KOs. You have to kind of really rely on your boss's orders and kind of like going your single pricing attack. But some of them are potentially going more of the Lost City sort of archetype. Path of the Peak is definitely some really good sort of play in the Giratina sort of build. So they are going to try and you need to constantly be going around it to get the big sort of teching options with it. And Arceus Giratina, you do have a kind of bit of a struggle one, because potentially they might be having like 300 plus HP with the likes of their V-Guard energy. So it's definitely something to be considering about. And they also will be playing their own Spiritomb, and they are going to be Iona proof because they do most likely play the Big Barrel engine. And the other ones I wanted to mention are just finally going to be looking at the Mew sort of decks. Mew is definitely something which is kind of a bit of a struggle. You can easily get the one-hit KOs, but as Mew is so consistent, they can always just have the boss order. There's so much drawing option. Even if you play a Spiritomb out there, they constantly go around the path to speak. It can kind of be a race war sort of thing like that, race to try and get to the end. So I definitely think it kind of can be a bit of a struggle against Mew as well, purely being a single prizer at the start, trying to get your setup right. If you do get the turn to Gardevoir, potentially even a KO on a Mew sort of play, I would say you're in a really good sort of spot. But sometimes if you don't get that, you can really fall behind very easily with Mew. So kind of looking at prediction, I'm going to talk to you exactly what I think is going to be well. I do think Gardevoir is going to be 20% of the meta share on day one. It is the most sort of played archetype online and obviously the rest of the world. So I do think a lot of people on the day one meta will be playing Gardevoir EX. I do think because of that, it's going to be hugely heavily countered. We could see the likes of a bigger increase of Dark Soul decks like Darkrai, or potentially other sort of really interesting decks as well around there. So it's definitely something to be considered about with Gardevoir. People will be worried about ties, and that could be a reason why people might not really be playing Gardevoir EX as much as possible, because that was one of the biggest cases. There was so many ties of Gardevoir EX. So many players didn't even get into day two. Even like Tord, unfortunately, did get a tie and didn't pursue into day two because he did unfortunately play Gardevoir EX. Wasn't a bad pick, but it was definitely something to be really considered about. And is it a strong pick for Worlds? Yes, I do think it is a strong pick for Worlds. I think it's definitely an archetype which could be really, really powerful, really, as long as you understand the meta and you start testing it. If you haven't started testing it now, start testing after the video, go on live, go to your local, really understand exactly how the deck works, and you can become much more fluid with your motions, know exactly how much damage it is, and that could potentially save time into reducing that amount of ties you might be getting. So I hope this has been helpful and a bit of an insight exactly why I think Gardevior X is definitely a good pick for Worlds. I'm going to do a couple more of these videos this week and next week in the lead up to Worlds, and I hope this is really helpful in your testing as well as also understanding where I think the meta for Worlds is going to shift them. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below. Will you be playing Gardevior EX at Worlds if you were going? I personally wouldn't, because I'm saving that for another deck, which I want to talk to you about later on this week, which I will be playing for Worlds. But I hope this has been really helpful in understanding exactly where I think Gardevior EX is. I will see you in the next video. Remember to subscribe and like, and I'll see you guys then. Bye for now.